You think you know the people around you, but what if the person who says they love you can still hurt you? What if the person who looks confident is secretly insecure? What if the person who says they don't care actually cares more than they let you see? And what if we've been trying to understand people by listening to what they say when their behavior has been telling us the truth all along? Let's explore why. You know what's strange about people? We can spend years knowing someone and still not know everything that's happening inside them. We see someone laughing and assume they're happy. We see someone being quiet and assume they're angry. We see someone becoming distant and immediately think they don't care anymore. But what if we're wrong? Human beings are incredibly good at showing people what they want them to see. Not necessarily because we're all dishonest. Sometimes we're just protecting something. Our pride, our insecurity, our fear, our sadness. Sometimes we're protecting an image of ourselves that we've spent years building. Think about it. How many times have you answered, "I'm okay," when you absolutely weren't? How many times have you smiled because explaining what you were actually feeling felt like too much work? Psychology has long recognized that people manage the way they present themselves to others. We adjust our behavior depending on where we are, who we're with, and what we believe is expected of us. You might be confident around your friends, quiet around strangers, professional at work, and completely different when you're alone. And none of those versions necessarily have to be fake. They're all pieces of the same person. But there's something else we don't talk about enough. Sometimes the version of you that everyone knows is the version you created because you learned that being yourself wasn't always safe. Maybe you grew up being told you were too emotional, so you learned to stop talking about your feelings. Maybe every time you made a mistake, someone made you feel stupid for it. So now you pretend you know everything. Maybe you were abandoned once, and now you leave people before they get the chance to leave you. And that's where understanding people becomes complicated, because sometimes what looks like arrogance is insecurity. What looks like anger is hurt. What looks like indifference is fear. And what looks like confidence might actually be someone desperately trying not to feel small. Have you ever tried to explain why something hurt you and the person you're talking to just didn't get it? Maybe they told you that you were being too sensitive. Maybe they said, "It's not that serious." Or maybe they gave you advice when all you really wanted was for someone to sit there and say, "Yeah, I understand why that hurt." There's something about being understood that feels almost like being held.
Yeah.
Not physically, emotionally. Because when someone understands what you're feeling without making you feel ridiculous for feeling it, you don't have to defend yourself anymore. And I think that's something most of us want much more than we admit. We want our parents to understand us, our partners, our friends, sometimes even strangers. We want someone to look at the complicated parts of us and not immediately decide that we're too much, too difficult, too emotional, or too needy. And when we don't get that understanding, something interesting can happen. We start trying harder to explain ourselves. Have you ever sent a paragraph, then another paragraph, then realized you're basically writing a whole courtroom defense for why you have the right to feel hurt? I think we've all been there, because when we feel misunderstood, we're not only trying to communicate, we're trying to make the other person see the world from inside our head. And that's almost impossible. Think about an argument between two people who love each other. One person says, "You never listen to me." The other says, "That's not true. I listen to you all the time." Now they're both defending themselves, and neither one is actually hearing the other. And this happens constantly, because sometimes we're not listening to understand. We're listening to respond. We're waiting for our turn to explain ourselves, to prove we're right, to prove they misunderstood us, to prove we're not the bad person in their story. And eventually, something changes. The person who once explained everything stops explaining. They stop correcting you, stop arguing, stop trying to make you understand. And you might think they're finally calm, but sometimes they've just stopped believing that being understood by you is possible. That's one of our emotional punchlines. Psychologists often talk about our need for connection, belonging, and emotional validation. And validation doesn't mean telling someone they're right about everything. It simply means acknowledging that their feelings make sense from where they're standing. You can disagree with someone's decision and still understand why they made it. That's the difference between saying, "You're overreacting," and saying, "I don't see it the same way, but I understand why that hurt you." And maybe this is why some of us hold on to certain people for so long, not because they treated us perfectly, not because the relationship was always healthy, but because somewhere along the way, they made us feel seen. They remembered the little things. They noticed when our voice changed. They knew when something was wrong, even when we said nothing. And when you've spent a lot of your life feeling misunderstood, being seen can feel like love. But here's where we have to be careful. Feeling understood by someone doesn't automatically mean they're good for you. And being understood isn't the same thing as being loved well. Sometimes we confuse the person who understands our pain with the person who knows how to heal it. And those are not always the same person, because human beings don't only reveal themselves through what they say, sometimes they reveal themselves through what they repeatedly do. Words are beautiful. They comfort us, they inspire us, they make promises, but words have one weakness. Anyone can say them. One of the biggest mistakes we make as human beings is believing people because of how they make us feel in a moment, instead of paying attention to what they consistently do. Because feelings can be created in minutes. Patterns take time to fake. Human behavior works in patterns. One mistake doesn't define someone. One argument doesn't define a relationship. One bad day doesn't reveal a person's character. But repeated behavior usually tells a story. Think about someone you've trusted before, not because of what they said, but because of what they repeatedly did. Maybe they remembered the little things. Maybe they showed up when everyone else disappeared. Maybe they kept choosing you without needing to announce it. Love isn't only spoken. Respect isn't only spoken. Kindness isn't only spoken. They're lived. Have you ever noticed some people apologize but never improve? Their words change. Their behavior doesn't. Psychologists often remind us that habits reveal far more than intentions. Most people genuinely mean what they say when they say it. But intention and consistent behavior are not always the same thing. That's why people become confused. They remember the promise instead of noticing the pattern. Maybe this is something I learned a little later than I wish I had. When I was younger, I believed that if someone explained themselves well enough, everything would eventually get better. So every apology gave me hope. Every promise sounded believable. Until one day, I stopped listening to what people said and started paying attention to what they repeatedly chose. Because every day, people are making choices. And over time, those choices become character. This doesn't mean people can't change. They absolutely can. But real change isn't announced. It's repeated. The truth is, if someone tells you who they are, listen. But if their behavior tells a different story, believe the behavior. Have you ever noticed how difficult it can be for some people to simply say, I was wrong? Not, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not, but you also did this. Not a 10-minute explanation about why what they did actually makes sense. Just, I was wrong. It's a surprisingly difficult sentence, because admitting that you're wrong isn't only about admitting that you made a mistake. Sometimes it feels like admitting something about who you are. Imagine you've spent years believing you're a good person, responsible, smart, fair. Then someone you care about tells you that you hurt them. For a moment, you have a choice. You can look inward, or you can protect the picture you have of yourself. And sometimes the second option feels much easier. This is where defensiveness comes in. When people feel that their identity, competence, or self-worth is being threatened, they may try to protect themselves psychologically. And that protection can look like denial, excuses, blaming, minimizing what happened, or turning the criticism back onto the person who gave it. But here's the uncomfortable part. We all do this. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not to the same degree. But most of us have moments when being wrong feels uncomfortable. Think about the last argument you had. When the other person finally told you something you didn't want to hear, did you immediately think, they're right? Or did your brain immediately start searching for evidence that they were wrong too? Exactly. Notice what just happened. The original issue disappeared. Now they're arguing about who has been worse. This happens because proving that the other person is also guilty can temporarily make us feel less guilty ourselves. But there's an important difference between protecting your ego and protecting yourself. Sometimes people really are being unfairly blamed. Sometimes criticism is manipulative. Sometimes someone genuinely misunderstood what happened. So accountability doesn't mean automatically agreeing with every accusation thrown at you. It means being willing to ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Is there any truth in what this person is saying? I think one of the hardest things about growing up is realizing that being a good person doesn't mean you're incapable of hurting people. You can have good intentions and still cause pain. You can love someone and still treat them unfairly. You can genuinely believe you're right and still be wrong. And learning to sit with that without immediately defending yourself is part of growing up. There's a huge difference between an apology that protects your image and an apology that takes responsibility. And maybe that's one of the biggest truths about people. We don't always defend the truth. Sometimes we defend ourselves. We defend the version of ourselves we want to believe is real. The kind person, the loyal friend, the good partner,
Yeah.
the reasonable person. And when someone's experience of us doesn't match that picture, it can feel threatening. But here's the strange thing. The moment you stop treating every mistake like an attack on your identity, you become much more capable of changing. Because you can finally say, comparison is one of the quietest things that can steal your happiness because it rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door. It simply whispers, look at them. Have you ever been genuinely happy for someone and at the exact same time felt a little sad for yourself? That's one of the most human experiences there is. Moments like these can make people feel guilty because they think, if I love this person, why does their success make me feel uncomfortable? The answer isn't always jealousy. Our brains naturally compare. It's one of the ways human beings try to understand where they fit in the world. We compare our progress, our relationships, our appearance, our income, even our happiness, not because we're bad people, but because we're constantly trying to answer one question. How am I doing compared to everyone else? Nothing about your own life changed. You didn't lose your job. You didn't lose your family. You didn't lose your home. The only thing that changed was what you compared your life to. That's the strange thing about comparison. It has the power to make an ordinary day suddenly feel like you're falling behind. Most people don't actually want your life. They want the feeling they imagine your life would give them. Peace, confidence, freedom, security, love. Sometimes we confuse someone else's achievements with the emotions we're hoping to experience ourselves. And social media has made this even harder because we're no longer comparing ourselves to a few people. We're comparing ourselves to hundreds. One of the biggest mistakes we make is comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. We compare our worst days to the moments they intentionally chose to show the world. I think we've all had moments where we wondered, am I behind? Should I have achieved more by now? Why does everyone else seem to be moving faster than me? The truth is, most of the people you're comparing yourself to are asking themselves the exact same questions. Comparison becomes dangerous when it changes how you see yourself. Because then someone else's success starts feeling like your failure. And those are two completely different things. Life isn't a race where everyone started from the same place. Different families, different opportunities, different struggles, different timing, different stories. Celebrate people, learn from people, be inspired by people, but don't measure your worth by someone else's timeline. Because the person you're comparing yourself to today may be quietly comparing themselves to someone else. So find happiness in whatever you do. There's something strange about human beings. Sometimes the less available something becomes, the more we want it. You might not have thought about them all that much when they were always there, but the moment their attention became uncertain, suddenly you wanted it back. Why? Why can someone become more interesting simply because they stopped giving us what they used to give us? One reason is something psychologists call the scarcity effect. When something feels limited or difficult to obtain, we can perceive it as more valuable. And this doesn't only apply to expensive products. It can apply to attention,
relationships,
opportunities, even people's approval. And there's another layer to this. When attention comes inconsistently, it can become surprisingly powerful. You don't know exactly when the next message is coming. You don't know when they'll suddenly become affectionate again. So your brain starts waiting for the next moment of reward. And that uncertainty can keep someone mentally attached, not necessarily because the connection is healthy, but because it's unpredictable. This is where things get complicated. Sometimes we mistake emotional intensity for emotional connection. The constant waiting, the uncertainty, the relief when they finally respond, the excitement when they suddenly become affectionate again. It can feel powerful, but powerful doesn't always mean healthy. Have you ever noticed how this can create a strange cycle? One person gets closer, the other pulls away. The first person becomes anxious and tries harder. The second person comes back. Everything feels amazing again, until the cycle repeats. At this point, you might wonder, why don't people just walk away? Because walking away isn't always about losing a person. Sometimes it feels like losing the possibility of finally getting what you've been waiting for. That line is important. Maybe you're not chasing the person they are today. Maybe you're chasing the version of them who once made you feel special, or the version you keep hoping they'll become. And this is where we need to be honest with ourselves. Someone being difficult to reach doesn't automatically make them valuable. Someone being emotionally unavailable doesn't make the connection deeper. And someone pulling away doesn't mean you need to work harder to earn their attention. Sometimes unavailable is simply unavailable. And this isn't only about relationships. We do this with opportunities, status, approval, even things we didn't originally want. Sometimes the moment something becomes unavailable, we start questioning whether we ever wanted it enough. So the next time you find yourself desperately wanting something or someone, ask yourself one question. Do I actually want this, or do I want it because I can't have it? Those are two very different things. I've learned that sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go. It's admitting that what we were chasing wasn't necessarily the person, it was the feeling of finally being chosen by them. And once you understand that, you can start asking a much better question. What am I actually looking for? Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop chasing what keeps making you question your worth.
Be honest, does this look good on me?
Honestly, I don't think it's the best one.
We've all said these. Just be honest with me. I'd rather hear the truth. Don't sugarcoat it. But here's the problem. Sometimes we only want the truth when it agrees with the version of ourselves we already believe. And just like that, the truth became less important than reassurance. Why does honesty sometimes make us uncomfortable? Because information isn't always just information. Sometimes it challenges our identity. If you believe you're a good friend and someone tells you that you've been selfish, you're not only hearing criticism about something you did, you're hearing something that challenges the way you see yourself. And the brain doesn't always respond kindly to that. Sometimes we don't reject the truth immediately. We negotiate with it. We look for another explanation, something that allows us to keep believing what we believed before. Think about a friend you've complained about repeatedly. Someone tells you, maybe they're not treating you well. And suddenly you have a list of reasons why they actually are a good person. They had a difficult childhood. They're stressed. They didn't mean it. They're actually really sweet when we're alone. And maybe all of those things are true. But sometimes understanding why someone hurts you doesn't mean you have to keep accepting the hurt. Comfort tells us what feels good right now. Truth sometimes tells us what we need to confront. And that's why the people who genuinely care about us aren't always the people who tell us what we want to hear. But let's be careful. Not everyone who claims to be honest is actually telling the truth. Cruelty isn't honesty. Insults aren't honesty. Humiliation isn't honesty. Sometimes people use the phrase, "I'm just being honest," to say things they know will hurt. Real honesty doesn't need to destroy someone's dignity. Healthy honesty can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't need to be cruel. It leaves room for compassion. It separates the person's behavior from their entire identity. One addresses behavior, the other attacks identity. Sometimes the truth we don't want to hear isn't about someone else. It's about us. Maybe we're the ones holding on to something that's already over. Maybe we're the ones refusing to apologize. Maybe we're expecting someone to change while continuing to reward the same behavior. Maybe we're saying we want something, but our choices keep proving otherwise. I think growing up means becoming comfortable with the possibility that sometimes your first interpretation isn't the right one. Your side of the story isn't the whole story. And being a good person doesn't mean you're always right. Sometimes maturity is being able to say, "Tell me what I'm not seeing." We need people who can tell us the truth without trying to make us feel small. People who can challenge us without humiliating us. People who care enough to say something uncomfortable and care enough to stay when we're processing it. Because sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes it embarrasses us. Sometimes it forces us to rethink someone or rethink ourselves. But avoiding the truth doesn't make it disappear. The truth doesn't always feel good. But sometimes it's the thing that finally sets us free from the story we've been telling ourselves. Human beings are full of contradictions. We can be generous and selfish, patient and impatient, loving and deeply hurtful, sometimes all in the same day. We like simple stories. Good people, bad people, heroes, villains. Reality is rarely that simple because most people are a mixture of both. Does that make them a bad person? Not necessarily. It makes them human.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes we make is assuming people behave exactly the same in every situation. Different environments bring out different parts of us. Stress changes behavior. Fear changes behavior. Power changes behavior. Love changes behavior. Have you ever surprised yourself? Maybe you said something you immediately regretted. Maybe you judged someone too quickly. Maybe someone thanked you for being kind on a day when you didn't even feel like a kind person. That's because we're all more complicated than the labels we give ourselves. Human beings naturally create stories. We see one action and we think we know the whole person, but one moment is rarely the whole story. There's another uncomfortable truth. Good intentions don't always create good outcomes. Sometimes the people who hurt us also genuinely loved us. That doesn't erase the pain, but it reminds us that love alone isn't always enough to protect people from causing harm. This is why relationships can become so confusing, because someone can make you feel deeply loved and deeply wounded. Our brains like certainty. It's easier to believe they're completely good or they're completely bad. Reality asks us to hold two truths at once. One of the biggest lessons life teaches us is that maturity isn't seeing people as perfect. It's seeing them clearly, the beautiful parts, the broken parts, the generous parts, the selfish parts, and deciding what you're willing to accept without pretending the other parts don't exist. Understanding why someone behaves the way they do doesn't mean you have to tolerate behavior that keeps hurting you. Compassion and boundaries can exist together. Maybe that's the truth about people. We're all capable of incredible kindness, and we're all capable of selfishness. The question isn't whether those parts exist. The question is which part we choose to feed over and over again. Being human isn't about never getting it wrong. It's about becoming aware of the person you're becoming, one choice at a time. If you've known someone for a long time, you've probably asked yourself, what happened to them? The person you knew 5 years ago doesn't seem like the same person anymore. Maybe they've become softer, maybe colder, more confident, more guarded. Or maybe you finally got to see a side of them that was always there. People aren't frozen in place. Our experiences change us. The people we meet change us. And sometimes the things we survive change us. Think about yourself 5 years ago. Would that version of you make every decision you make today? Probably not. You've learned things, lost things, and discovered things about yourself you didn't know before. Our behavior can be influenced by our environment, experiences, relationships, stress, and the roles we take on. Someone who has experienced repeated rejection more guarded. Someone who's been given opportunities may become more confident. Sometimes what looks like a personality change is actually adaptation. But not every change feels good. Sometimes people become guarded because they were hurt. They stop trusting because trusting once came with a price. They stop being vulnerable because vulnerability was once used against them. But understanding why someone changed doesn't mean every behavior they developed afterward is healthy. Maybe you've had someone hurt you and thought, they weren't always like this. And maybe you're right. Maybe they really were different once. But here's the difficult part. The person they used to be doesn't cancel out the person they're choosing to be now. People can change, but you can't build a relationship with someone's potential. You have to respond to who they are. Of course, people can change. They can learn healthier ways to communicate, become more patient, control their anger, become more responsible. But genuine change has a strange characteristic. You don't have to keep announcing it. Real change eventually becomes visible in behavior. The person who used to explode learns to pause. The person who disappeared during conflict learns to communicate. The person who blamed everyone else begins asking, what part of this was mine? Because sometimes people don't change. They simply change their strategy. They apologize because they're afraid of losing you. Then, when everything feels safe again, the old behavior returns. That's not transformation. That's a temporary change in pattern. But while we're watching other people change, we're changing too. Maybe you don't tolerate what you once tolerated. Maybe you used to chase people who didn't choose you. Now you value peace. Maybe you once needed everyone to understand you. Now you're comfortable knowing that some people simply won't. I think one of the strangest parts of growing up is realizing that sometimes you don't miss the person. You miss who you were when you knew them. The version of yourself who had different dreams, different expectations, different ideas about love, different ideas about what you deserved. And that's okay. Change doesn't always mean becoming someone completely new. Sometimes it's becoming more honest about who you've always been. Sometimes it's unlearning what you were taught. And sometimes it's finally allowing yourself to become someone you couldn't afford to be before. So can people change? Absolutely. And sometimes growing means accepting that something can have been meaningful and still be over. Maybe that's the truth about change. It's not always about becoming someone else. Sometimes it's simply becoming someone you can finally live with. After everything we've talked about, maybe the truth about people isn't that we're complicated. Maybe we're simply human. We hide things. We want to be understood. We make promises. We make mistakes. We compare ourselves. We protect our pride. We hurt people we love. And sometimes we hurt ourselves trying to be loved by the right people. But we also change. We learn. We apologize. We grow. And sometimes we become better than the person we used to be. So the next time someone confuses you, don't only ask, what's wrong with them? Ask, what might be happening underneath what I'm seeing? And when you look at yourself, give yourself that same curiosity. Because people always leave clues in the things they say, in the things they avoid, in what they repeat, and in what they choose. You just have to pay attention. Until next time, stay curious.